Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION@CUENDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 25th of September 2024. From the news section. Glasgow's LEZ makes promising start as air pollution levels drop. This article has been written by Mark McDougall and it's being read by me, Corey. Glasgow's low emissions zone is having a promising impact on air pollution according to new data released. The latest air quality annual progress report shows that levels of nitrogen dioxide in the city centre and LEZ area has dropped by 20% compared to diffusion tube monitoring from the previous year. The annual report is the first to consider pollution levels during LEZ enforcement following the scheme's full rollout to all vehicle types on the 1st of June 2023. It remains too soon to determine the full impact the LEZ has had on air quality. That's mainly because the LEZ was only in place for the final 7 months of 2023, while zone residents and non-complainant taxis were afforded additional time to move towards compliance. Zone residents didn't need to comply with the LEZ until June 1st, 2024, with 778 exceptions handed to taxis for the first year. There was also a 15.3% drop in nitrogen dioxide concentrations at locations outside the city. Nitrogen dioxide and airborne particle material are the main pollutant concerns in Glasgow, and the annual report assesses air quality so that they can be compared against legal requirements. In addition to diffusion tube monitoring, there are 11 automatic monitoring stations around the city. All stations recorded concentrations below the legal objective, but 2023's results showed further decreases in the level of pollution. There were areas of concerns highlighted by the data, with diffusion tube monitoring on Gordon Street and under Haylanman's umbrella showing marginal exceedances of the legal requirements, while the automatic station on Hope Street only narrowly met the objective, a repeat of 2022's results. But while it's too soon to fully understand the impact on air quality, initial results from monitoring are promising, and it is expected that further improvements can be expected in years to come. Councillor Angus Miller, City Convener for Transport and Climate, said, "Air pollution contributes to hundreds of deaths in Glasgow each year, as well as exacerbating long-term health inequalities and the health conditions of thousands of Glaswegians." Glasgow's low emissions zone was introduced to address stubbornly high levels of air pollution in the city centre, and with Dundee, Aberdeen and Edinburgh now implementing their own LEZs, Scotland's cities have joined hundreds across Europe in taking this kind of action to improve air quality. The early progress recorded in Glasgow in 2023, with a 20% drop in the city centre's nitrogen dioxide levels, is really encouraging. With some locations still showing breaches of legal limits, however, the impact of the LEZ's full rollout will only become clear within the next year's annual monitoring data, and Glasgow will continue our work to seek cleaner, more breathable air that meets legal requirements. Earlier this year, Glasgow set out refreshed plans to tackle pollution across the city, It is a city-wide approach, but there remains a level of focus on the city centre due to its pollution levels. It includes a review of air quality monitoring with a focus around schools, hospitals and care homes, continuing vehicle idling awareness campaigns and enforcement, supporting transport strategies which benefit air quality, and supporting the expansion of the city's travel network. With taxis working to become compliant, it was revealed last month that one of the only companies permitted to make LEZ-compliant upgrades to taxis suddenly went bust. They had reported that 225 taxi operators were still driving under exemptions that are due to expire in October, and have now been unable to make the change, potentially putting their jobs at risk. The company employed to carry out the upgrades, Vehicle Repowering Services, VRS, went into liquidation in late July, despite having a, quote, waiting list for conversions, end quote. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Mark McDougall, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 25th of September 2024. From the news section. New Sauchiehall Street venue promises to bring the good times back. This article is written by Mark McDougall, and it's being read by me, Corey. A brand new bar and live entertainment venue, opening in Glasgow next weekend, has promised an experience unlike any other in the city. Berlinkies will open on Friday, October 4th at 12 p.m, and they say they have booked some of the UK's best musicians and performers as part of their nightly programme of entertainment. That includes live bands, musicians and aerial artists, as well as 6 weeks of stand-up comedy events headlined by Susie McCabe and hosted by Viv McGee. Huge investment has been made into the bar, which will be located at 396 Sauchiehall Street, with £2.3 million spent transforming it into a one-of-a-kind venue with 2 stages, an array of bars and booths, benches and a state-of-the-art sound system. A new kitchen has also been installed to allow guests the opportunity to eat while at the venue. Brendan Curran, operations manager at Berlinkies, said, "This has been Glasgow's best kept secret for months, and now we're thrilled to finally unveil our vision to the world. There really is nothing quite like Berlinkies in the city. It's all about bringing back the good times. It's the perfect place for people looking for something a little different, whether it's catching a gig, laughing out loud at the comedy act, or dancing on tables with your friends until 3 a.m. It's a truly unique venue, and we're confident it will offer guests an experience unlike anything else currently on offer in Glasgow. We've got big plans for Berlinkies and have plenty of exciting events planned from now right the way through until Christmas. We believe we've created something really special for the city, and we're confident this will become a must-visit place for anyone visiting Glasgow for years to come." The 2-storey venue has a range of unique features, including a roaring fireplace and plenty of dance space. It was also feature The Gallery, I apologise that's how it's written, which is a private bar and dining space available for exclusive use for corporate events and more intimate gatherings. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Mark McDougall, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 25th of September 2024. From the news section. New Starbucks opening in Stirling's Thistle Shopping Centre. This article was written by Josh Carmichael, and it's being read by me, Corey. A brand new Starbucks is opening in a busy Scottish shopping centre this weekend. Thistle's Stirling has announced the opening date for the new Starbucks will be on Saturday the 28th of September, and the first customers will get some freebies. The first 200 people through the door purchasing a large drink will receive a reusable tumbler. But there will also be other offers before the shop opens on Saturday. On Friday the 27th of September, the day before the official opening, vouchers will be handed out to customers within the centre to claim a free drink the next day. Alongside the chance of a free drink, the first 200 customers who visit the new Starbucks will be able to try samples from its signature food and drinks menu. Gary Turnbull, Centre Director at Thistles, said, "The exciting addition of Starbucks to our roster of retailers reflects our commitment to providing our visitors with a diverse shopping experience. Whether it's grabbing a coffee on the go or enjoying a moment to relax, we know that Starbucks will quickly become a favourite destination for our shoppers. We are anticipating opening day to be busy with some fantastic prizes up for grabs, so shoppers are advised to get there early." The new Starbucks, which will be situated on Kings Mall, will be open at 9 AM in the Thistle Centre on Saturday. As part of the ongoing improvement plans, the Thistle Centre has also invested in excess of £3.5 million to bring the car park back into operational use. The car park has been closed since lockdown. Works include resurfacing and redecoration and the introduction of energy-efficient lighting, a new air extraction system, and a new fire detection system. Work is currently ongoing and the car park is due to open before Christmas, creating additional city centre car parking spaces. Mark Hewitt, Director at Scoop, Thistle's asset managers, said, "We're delighted to welcome Starbucks to Thistle's Stirling. The popular brand has committed to a long-term contract, cementing its commitment to the city and will generate local jobs. Footfall at Thistles is currently running ahead of last year's figures, and these new additions should serve to increase footfall further. Both brands are a great addition to the range of retailers already available at Thistles, Stirling, and we know they will prove popular with shoppers." That article was from the Herald Scotland, and it was from the news section. It was written by Josh Carmichael, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 25th of September 2024. From the news section. Rapist who targeted women on multiple occasions has sentence increased. This article was written by Mark McDougall, and it's being read by me, Corey. A man who raped his 2 victims on multiple occasions has had his prison sentence increased following a successful appeal by the Crown. Conor McNeilis was locked up for 6 years in April 2024 after being found guilty following a trial at the High Court in Edinburgh. He had raped 2 women over the course of 5 years, with the first victim targeted on 2 occasions in 2016 and the second victim multiple times between 2020 and 2021. The 27-year-old was just 19 at the time of his first attack. The Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service appealed to the court to consider imposing a longer jail term due to the serious nature of the offences. The appeal court upheld the Crown's appeal, and the original sentence was quashed and replaced with a 9-year custodial term. The appeal court has a high threshold for appeals from the Crown, and it's only allowed in limited circumstances. The sentence must be unduly lenient, meaning it falls outside the range of sentences the judge could have reasonably considered appropriate, having taken account of all relative factors. Kenny Donnelly, Deputy Crown Agent for the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, said, COPFS is committed to improving the criminal justice journey for victims, from the stage of reporting all the way through to sentencing. Prosecutors have the responsibility in legislation to consider appeals based upon undue leniency in sentencing. Such appeals are rare, but important to ensure the public interest is properly served. They allow the court to review sentences that the Crown believes falls outside the range of punishment reasonably considered appropriate. COPFS believes that it is important that the harm caused by sexual offending and the culpability of the convicted person must be consistently reflected in sentencing decisions. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Mark McDougall, and it was read by me, Corey.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 25th of September 2024 from the business section. Scotland a true global contender on green finance. This article is by Ian McConnell. Scotland can become a true global contender in the race to capture the economic opportunities from growth in green and sustainable financial services internationally, Kate Forbes has declared. The Deputy First Minister observed Scotland was one of the world's oldest financial centres, as she underlined the potential for this sector to benefit from enormous investment that will flow into net zero projects and assets at home and abroad. Ms Forbes was responding to a task force report which will be published today and recommends actions including working with the City of London Corporation to locate sustainable finance activity to Scotland and looking at new ways to attract more financial institutions to build their sustainable and green businesses in Scotland. The report, which will be launched by Ms Forbes at the Ethical Finance Global 2024 Summit in Edinburgh today, also recommends collaboration across sectors and academia to support the upskilling of Scotland's workforce in sustainable finance. David Pitt-Wilson, Chair of the Scottish Task Force for Green and Sustainable Financial Services, flags a huge opportunity for Scotland's financial services industry to serve the world and profound benefit if this can be seized. In the Scottish Government's response to the Task Force report, which is also published today, Ms Forbes says, "The recently published Green Industrial Strategy has a clear overarching aim to help Scotland realise the economic benefits of the global transition to net zero. There are few areas of greater competitive advantage and potential than green and sustainable financial services. Set in this context, it is with particular pleasure and optimism that I welcome the report of Scotland's Task Force for Green and Sustainable Financial Services." She notes the Scottish Government and the Global Ethical Finance Initiative launched the task force in 2022 to examine important questions such as how could Scotland's financial services industry leverage the enormous investment that will flow into net zero projects and assets, both here and abroad, to build up a green financial services cluster? And how do we maximise the potential for skilled jobs, growth and exports? Ms Forbes adds, "We knew that Scotland could be a natural home for green and sustainable finance because the foundations are strong. In Scotland, large financial institutions are clustered alongside professional services firms, energy and technical experts, and specialist businesses across a range of disciplines. The world saw in Glasgow in 2021 that Scotland had both a progressive energy and climate change policy at home and the convening power to deliver real advances on climate finance on the global stage." Describing the final report of the task force as impressive, she declares that it sets out a framework of recommendations that will help Scotland become a true global contender in the race to capture the economic opportunities that the growth in green and sustainable financial services presents. The report from the task force, in which Scottish financial enterprise is also involved as an industry partner, makes 31 recommendations on how the public and private sectors can work together to encourage and fund green investments. It emphasises the Scottish finance industry is particularly well placed to seize the opportunities presented by the just transition and identifies 4 areas for action: policy, promotion, investment and skills. Ms. Forbes, who was also Cabinet Secretary for Economy and Gaelic, said, "This report is a decisive action plan as we seek to make Scotland the natural home for green and sustainable finance. The financial services sector is key to delivering the benefits of the just transition, and we will use this route map to work together and ensure that Scotland, one of the world's oldest financial centres, is able to maximise the opportunities ahead of us." Business and social entrepreneur Mr. Pitt Watson said, "Climate may be the greatest challenge facing humankind. Addressing it will require a huge investment and the services of the finance industry. Finance is a jewel in Scotland's industrial crown. So not only should there be many opportunities for green investment in Scotland, from wind to housing, there is also a huge opportunity for its financial services industry to serve the world. The task force has already stimulated a considerable amount of action, and there is so much more to do. This report is a strategy for Scottish finance to play its proper role in addressing the climate challenge." Mr. Pitt Watson says in the report, "Finance, quite as much as electricity or battery or wind power, is a critical enabling industry for the just transition. Without finance, it is difficult to see how climate change can be addressed. So this is a huge opportunity for financial institutions which have the appropriate skills to encourage and fund profitable green investments. They can do well by doing good, and we will all prosper. The Scottish finance industry is particularly well placed to seize that opportunity. If it can do so, it will be of profound benefit. It will help address humankind's greatest challenge. It will help build a new infrastructure in Scotland, and of course it will strengthen, focus and expand the Scottish finance industry itself. This is an industry at which Scotland excels, generating 9.6% of the country's gross value added, with skilled jobs which pay a third higher than the average wage in Scotland." That article was by Ian McConnell. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 25th of September 2024, from the Voices section. Clear route map for Scotland to maximise opportunity. This article is by Kate Forbes. Scotland is at a pivotal time in its journey towards a net zero economy. The costs of transition are lowest and the opportunities greatest, with early and well-managed action. To reap these benefits, the financial system has to be ready for the task. I am clear that this must be a joint public-private effort, and at COP26 in Glasgow, financial organisations showed their readiness to help fund the transition to a net zero economy. For the Scottish Government's part, the new Green Industrial Strategy, which I launched earlier this month, makes support for green economy, professional and financial services one of our 5 priorities, along with establishing a new system across the public sector for attracting investment. Scotland is well placed to achieve these ambitions. It is one of the world's oldest financial hubs and the UK's second financial centre after London, accounting for 9.8% of the Scottish economy and employing about 144,000 people. To enhance this position, in 2022, I established the Scottish Task Force for Green and Sustainable Financial Services, headed by David Pitt-Wilson, to provide an action plan to help make Scotland a globally competitive hub for green and sustainable financial services and investment. Its recommendations focus on 4 areas: policy, promotion, investment and skills, and Mr. Pitt-Wilson is unequivocal about the importance of the task, stating that the benefits can be profound if we succeed. I welcome the findings, and we will build on our initial response by looking in detail at what we need to do to put them into practice. The Scottish Government is already addressing many of the task force's overarching aims. As set out in our programme for government, we will deliver a coordinated programme to attract investment in priority areas of net zero, housing and infrastructure. In support of this, work is underway to develop a national project pipeline of investment opportunities and to launch an investment portal next year. Equally importantly, we are working in lockstep with the finance sector to achieve our joint ambitions. Success is not inevitable. Other countries are pursuing a similar goal and will only happen with focused, decisive action. But now, together, government and industry have a clear route map for Scotland to maximise this huge opportunity. That article was by Kate Forbes.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of September. From the news section, George Murdoch murder probe finds new DNA evidence. Article written by Gabriel Mackay. Police have announced a significant development in the investigation of a murder which took place 41 years ago. George Murdoch, a taxi driver in Aberdeen, was murdered with a cheese wire as he turned into the Pitfolding Station Road area of the city on the evening of Thursday the 29th of September 1983. Two young cyclists witnessed the attack and raised the alarm, but police arrived too late to save him. In 2022, police issued an appeal for a man seen in Wilson Sports Bar on Market Street in Aberdeen in September 2015, who was wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt. He was described as small, stocky, in his 60s or 70s and local to Aberdeen. Now Police Scotland have announced what they describe as a significant development, with advancements in forensic science allowing them to identify DNA from the scene. That profile has been further enhanced to allow officers to search for anyone related to the DNA sample, known as familial DNA. This involves a search of the National DNA Database to identify potential close relatives of an individual when their DNA profile is not in the database. Police have identified an initial list of 200 possible genetic matches to the profile from the scene, and will now attempt to contact these people to establish any family link. Detective Inspector James Callender said, "This new DNA data is significant and will help us take a step closer to getting justice for Mr. Murdoch's family. The familial DNA links identified will assist in tracing people who can help with our inquiries. I want to make clear these individuals are not suspects, but we hope they may be able to help with our ongoing investigation. I would ask everyone to think back to when George was murdered. If you have any concerns at all from around that time, please don't dismiss them and contact us. The solving of this horrific crime requires the help of the public. I would urge anyone with information to please come forward. We want to give George's family some much needed closure. No one has ever been arrested in connection with Mr. Murdoch's murder, who was affectionately known as Dodd by loved ones, and Police Scotland's major investigation team continue to investigate the case." In a statement, his family said, "This latest development with the familial DNA is a huge leap forward, and we thank the police for their continued endeavour in getting to this stage. It is very encouraging and refreshes our hope that we can finally identify who is responsible for Dodd's murder." And the article was written by Gabriel Mackay. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of September, from the news section, Scottish Isle to become party island as part of charity fundraiser. Report by Mark McDougall. The population of a remote Scottish island could more than triple as part of a disco fest created to raise money for charity. The Isle of Coll is home to just 164 people, including rugby legend Bob Wainwright, OBE, who moved to the island at the end of his playing career in 1999. The 59-year-old former Glasgow Warriors, Scotland and British and Irish Lions forward owns a farm on the island, but, following the diagnosis of motor neuron disease of his friend and former teammate Doddy Weir, he has looked to raise funds to aid the fight against the disease. My Name's Doddy Foundation was set up after Weir's diagnosis, and Wainwright has been one of the main driving forces behind the relentless fight to fund vital research into the illness. He was recognised for his efforts with an OBE in last year's New Year's Honours list, and has helped raise more than £5 million for the foundation as a founder of Doddy Aid. Now this weekend, he'll be hosting Doddy's Disco Fest on the island with a programme of events over 2 days on Friday and Saturday. It will feature a synthetic ceilidh from Piper Active, whilst BBC Radio 2's OJ Borg will have a DJ set, before Dangerous Dave keeps the party going with a community playlist. The Hebridean Island sits 6 miles west of Mull in the Atlantic Ocean, and is described as a place to get away from it all by Visit Scotland. There's no police officer on the island, so organisers are ensuring it doesn't turn into an all-night rave, and Wainwright is hoping that people enjoy the island and help raise plenty of money for charity. He said, "This exemplifies what Doddy was all about. He was great fun and loved a party. Over the years, as much fun as we've had exercising to raise money for the foundation and its mission to end MND through vital research, this will be a little different. Thankfully, we're pretty experienced at organising this type of thing now, so I think it's safe to say this won't be a firefest, but we do know people will be here to let their hair down, all for a very good cause. I can't wait to welcome people for a dance and a drink or two, but also to enjoy a slice of life on our beautiful island. There are more than 30 beaches to choose from, wild swimming spots, and a whole host of other community events happening. Tickets for the event at Arncree Community Centre are still available online, with proceeds going directly to both My Name's Doddy Foundation and the Call Community Centre, Arncree. That's Arncree, spelled ANCRIDHE. I'm sorry, my Gaelic pronunciation is terrible. The charity is calling on people across the UK and beyond to organise their own disco fest for Doddy by emailing info@mynamesdoddy.co.uk. That's info@myname5DODDIE.co.uk to receive an information pack. Paul Thompson, Director of Fundraising and Communications at My Name's Doddy Foundation, said, "When it comes to organising fundraisers, we always look to encapsulate the spirit of Doddy, and he would have been in his element at an event like this. We continue to be blown away by the ingenuity of Rob's fundraising efforts. His contributions have truly been unbelievable. We hope this latest amazing event he has organised will inspire others to organise their own fundraisers, whether at a rugby club, a village hall or a community centre, just as he has inspired more than 100,000 people to log their miles every January for Doddy Aid." And the article was written by Mark McDougall. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of September, from the news section, exclusive: well-known fish and chip shop in historic village for sale, by Brian Donnelly, business correspondent. A famous fish and chip shop in a historic Scottish seaside location has been brought to market. The premises in the most beautiful 17th century fishing village also have a spacious family home. Hook, Line and Sinker in Portsoy, Aberdeenshire is an easy to operate venture with a simple yet highly effective trading model, said agent CCL Property. The business is presented in excellent condition, boasting exceptionally well appointed facilities and modern catering equipment, with nothing subject to lease. This comprehensive and up-to-date equipment provision contributes significantly to its outstanding trading reputation in the locality. Customers travel considerable distances to enjoy their fare, as evidenced by positive reviews on various platforms. This takeaway caters to a strong year-round demand from both residents and passing trade, with a significant boost in turnover during the spring and summer tourist seasons. Hook, Line and Sinker specialises in traditional, high-quality fish and chip meals while also offering a wider menu, including pizzas. The establishment prides itself on catering to diverse dietary requirements, including options for vegetarians and those with allergies. Emphasising quality, the business primarily sources its produce locally for food preparation. While currently trading at a high profitable level, the business has the potential to further increase its income, supported by its modern, fully owned equipment. The agent also said, "This mixed-use property at 28 and 30 Seafield Street in Portsoy offers a unique combination of commercial fish and chip shop and a spacious family home." Portsoy was recently hailed as one of the most beautiful seaside towns in the UK by The Telegraph. Films including the Whiskey Galore remake were filmed here. The agent also said, located in the charming port town of Portsoy, this property occupies a prime spot on Seafield Street, close to the village centre and the beautiful historic harbour. Portsoy is a popular seaside holiday destination, renowned for its scenic coastline, picturesque walking trails and proximity to neighbouring golf courses. The leasehold sale is available at £75,000. And the article was an exclusive by Brian Donnelly, and it was read by me, Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday 29th of September, from the news section, exclusive, Barlinnie Special Unit, What It Can Teach Us Today. Article written by Gabriel Mackay. A new book will present the most in-depth history of the Barlinnie Special Unit and share some of the lessons which could be applied to today's prison system. The Barlinnie Special Unit, Art, Punishment and Innovation, edited by Dr. Kirsten Anderson of Napier University, brings together accounts from prisoners, guards, psychologists, academics and more to tell the tale of the BSU, which controversially adopted a therapeutic approach to dealing with some of Scotland's most violent and dangerous men. The unit was established at a time when Scottish prisons were known for being, by far, the worst in the UK. With the abolition of the death penalty in 1969, convicts who knew they would likely never be released, but, by the same token, wouldn't be hanged, felt they had nothing to lose. Violence between inmates was common, as it was against guards, sometimes in the form of full-scale riots. The approach at the time was to dispatch the most troublesome prisoners to remote incarceration in the north of the country. If it wasn't quite the Soviet Gulag system, it wasn't far off, with inmates frequently subject to isolation and any resistance met with an iron fist. A special segregation unit at HMP Inverness, dubbed simply the Cages, was described as the Siberia for prisoners in the Scottish prison system by Jimmy Boyle, one Scotland's most violent prisoner, who was released from the BSU and never reoffended. Dr. Anderson tells the Herald, "They were very violent, they were very austere, we were still slopping out. There was very little communication between prisoners and their families. Later on, a number of the riots were about that. Putting them in a cage within a prison cell, often removing their clothing, it was drastically different to what prisons look like today, and it wasn't that long ago. By 1970 it had become clear that simply quashing dissent by force wasn't working. Riots, attacks on staff and dirty protests were common. A working party under the chairmanship of Alex Stephen was set up by the then Scottish Prisons Department to consider the treatment of certain male long-term prisoners and potentially violent prisoners. It included senior prisoner officials, a consultant psychiatrist, 2 prison governors and representatives of the Scottish Prisons Officer Association, SPOA. An idea was proposed by Ken Murray, a Scottish prison officer, and Ian Stephen, who worked for the Scottish Prison Service as a forensic psychologist, removing some of the most violent offenders and using therapy rather than repression to deal with them. 3 years later, the Barlinnie Special Unit opened in the former women's wing of the prison. Dr. Anderson says, it was immediately not popular. There were lots of people in the prison service who did not agree with it because it was seen as being soft in some of the most violent men in the service. These were men who had attacked prison officers and other prisoners, which made it very difficult for staff in the unit in the early days because they were so often seen by their fellow prison officers as going to the other side. It lasted for nearly 22 years. I think it was a month shy before they shut it down. The first inmates were suspicious too. Some had come direct from the cage in Inverness and found the relaxed atmosphere disorientating. Many felt the focus on psychology was a thinly veiled plot to get them sent to Carstairs. And understandably, Dr. Anderson says, most of the men in the first round of the unit were coming from the cages, so of course you're going to be suspicious about what's going on. Why are you all of a sudden being so kind to me? What are you going to do to me next? We have a chapter by Johnny Steele and he writes about that. As someone who was in the prison system for many years, coming to the unit was really a shock for him. They were highly suspicious of the idea that a prison officer would call you by your first name or ask how your mum was doing. Not everyone stayed in the unit. They found it stressful or too challenging because, unlike in a jail, you couldn't just keep your head down and keep to yourself. If you were too quiet, the community would ask why you weren't participating. It wasn't the holiday that some people like to propose it was. Rather than solitary confinement and slopping out, the inmates could paint and sculpt, wear their own clothes, and have visits from loved ones outside of set hours. Initially, the response of the media, who were invited to an open day on the 25th of July, 1974, was positive. In the Glasgow Herald, Jim Hewitson wrote, "The visit to the murderer's box has turned out to be a rather surprising, almost baffling encounter with a bunch of nice guys." However, things soon turned and the Scottish Prison Service began to be accused of giving some of the most violent, dangerous criminals in Scotland an easy ride. For those working on the unit though, the new approach brought surprising results. David J. Cook, the first psychologist to work at the special unit, used Robert D. Hare's method to determine whether the prisoners suffered from psychopathy. 72% fitted his description of psychopath, and another 25% had significant elements of the disorder. This compared to 3 to 5% of the prison population as a whole. Prevailing wisdom held that such people could not be treated. Dr. Cook writes, "The BSU prisoners were not a good bet for treatment. They were not a good bet for change." Change they did though. The psychologist reviewed prisoner records comparing the number of assaults inmates had committed during their sentence before and after entering the unit. He found that the prisoner cohort had committed a combined 181 assaults before being transferred, certainly an undercount because of how much prison violence goes unreported, while a grand total of 2 happened in the BSU. Dr. Anderson says, "I think this speaks to a larger challenge around understanding punishment, because, in some ways, the unit did exactly what it was supposed to do, and that still wasn't enough for some people. At the time, people looked to Scotland and were fascinated by this proposition to have this therapeutic unit in Barlinnie. There's this BBC video from the 70s which opens with the men in Barlinnie walking in a circle in the exercise yard, and it's such a perfect representation of the Victorian ideals of a prison. And then they go into the special unit, and you see guys in their 70s outfits talking with the prison officers. It's such a complete juxtaposition between what was happening in the rest of the service, and that made a lot of people angry. The unit was quietly closed in 1994, and today no such institution exists in Scotland. HMP Grendon in Buckinghamshire is the UK's only therapeutic prison. Dr. Anderson believes, though, that there is plenty the Barlinnie Special Unit can teach us today. She says, "We're not proposing another special unit in the same blueprint, but hopefully this book can open up some dialogue about the possibility of Scotland thinking differently about punishment. Right now, you look at the development of HMP Barlinnie, which is going to be a huge prison, with the exception of the community custody units for women, of which there are no more planned to be built. We're on the road to just building bigger prisons and putting more people in them. I think Scotland has the capacity to think more creatively. It doesn't have to be a blueprint of the unit, but we can take some of those lessons learned. It probably hasn't happened for a number of reasons. The SBS work in the present and, to a certain degree, they have to. But they're not very good at highlighting the they do which is good and meaningful, and that's political because people jumping in that. To do something good and meaningful in a prison, you have to pay attention to the individual, their families and their communities, and that, to some, can look like they're not being punished, and sometimes the media will perpetuate that. The Barlinnie Special Unit is a perfect example of that. The focus was on the men getting to decorate their cells, to wear their own clothes, the fact that they could have visitors at any time. It wasn't on the difficulty of these men having to come out of a prison system that was incredibly brutal. Coming out of solitary confinement and physical punishment to the BSU, it wasn't just like walking in and saying, "Oh great, this is so much better." These men were traumatised. I think it asks us, a Scottish society, what we mean and what we want from punishment. If truly the outcome we want is for people to be able to come out of prison and be integrated back into communities and contribute, and not to commit a crime again, the punishment that was happening in the 70s is not going to make that happen. It's more something like the Barlinnie Special Unit that would make that happen. Jimmy Boyle left the unit, and he didn't re-offend. He became quite successful as an artist in his own right after that, and a lot of people didn't like that. They didn't like that he did what the punishment was supposed to do. So that asks bigger questions of us as a society. If we just want prisons to punish people in their communities, that they're doing it really well. But if we really want something in which we recognise the harm that is done to people, and ask the people who have perpetuated that harm to respond to it, we need something different. We know just locking people up doesn't do that. Most people just accept prisons as, oh yeah, of course we have prisons, why would we not? But there are different ways we can respond to people who have harmed us, and I hope this book contributes to that in some way. The Barlinnie Special Unit, Art, Punishment and Innovation, is available from Waterside Press, Amazon, and all good bookshops. It is released on October the 1st, recommended retail price £25, and the article was an exclusive by Gabriel Mackay. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 29th of September, from the Arts and Entertainment section, James Cosmo wows crowd at sellout Wigtown Book Festival. Report by Josh Carmichael. Hollywood veteran and Scots actor James Cosmo made an appearance at the Wigtown Book Festival this week to discuss his life and career. The acting legend, who has appeared in more than 130 Hollywood films, made a sellout appearance during the first weekend of the world-famous book festival. During the event, Cosmo was speaking about his new venture of working with Annandale Distillery to develop his new Storyman label whisky. But fans got exactly what they came for, as the 76-year-old discussed the ins and outs of his lengthy career, where he has starred in everything from Braveheart and Highlander, to Game of Thrones, The Chronicles of Narnia, Troy and Trainspotting. The fact that he was a big man and an accomplished rider proved to be a huge help in his early days, but he said he tried to avoid middle-aged projects for as long as he could. He said, "I tended to play Bigfoot lumps. I did a lot of tough guy stuff. I could ride horses, so did an awful lot of stuff on horses. In fact, if you look at me from behind, my backside is actually saddle-shaped. And then I tried to deny middle age as long as possible, but it arrived anyway, and I found that you actually start to play more interesting and deeper characters. And that's a wonderful thing about being an actor. You can act until you fall over." There's evidently no signs of Cosmo retiring from his passion anytime soon. He is currently appearing in the BBC thriller Night Sleeper, and has a 3-part series for Amazon, filmed in Glasgow with Martin Compson, called Fear. A contrasting figure at the first weekend was Geelong Thubton, an actor turned Buddhist monk whose handbook for hard times offers a guide to surviving and thriving through life's difficulties. The monk, who spent years at the Samya Ling Tibetan Buddhist Centre at Eskildare Muir, is a world-renowned teacher of meditation. Over the weekend, he led a workshop allowing people to try relaxation techniques. This year's festival features more than 250 events and activities and runs until 6th of October. Highlights of the second weekend include a festival within a festival dedicated to food with demonstrations and talks. They will feature a host of well-known guests such as the Hebridean baker Conor MacLeod, Scotland's national chef Gary McLean, MasterChef finalist Sarah Rankin, and Sanyana Moda Sanyana, creator of amazing modern Indian cookery. In an article written by Josh Carmichael. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 29th of September, from the news section. Palm Ayres made my day at the Wigtown Book Festival, by sports writer Kevin McKenna. At lunchtime on Saturday, a street theatre troupe of mummers and musicians are cavorting in front of Wigtown's county buildings. They seem to be dressed up in Chinese Ming Dynasty costumes, and the sleepy notes of 1920s Delta blues are curling around them as they bend themselves into sinewy shapes. Who knows what the hell is going on here? But who cares? If Raw Street Theatre came with an explanator, it would ruin the fun. Two elderly locals have a go anyway. There's a dancer trying to be a tree here, and his Galavidian dialect dancer is pronounced doncer. A few minutes later, as I'm looking for the pop-up bar, I overhear two gents talking about Dougie Donnelly, the Kenspiegel former BBC Scotland sports presenter. On hearing that the estimable Mr. Donnelly is appearing at the Wigtown Book Festival, one of them says, "I'd be right keen for gan to see Dougie." I've been in this town for barely 24 hours and I began to fall in love with the pitch and fade of this lovely old vernacular. It adds a lyrical counterbalance to my low-flat glottal Glaswegianisms. An hour earlier, I'd been in the packed upper room of the county buildings to hear the portrait artist, Juano Diaz, read from his memoir, Slumboy, about the challenges of growing up gay, adopted, gypsy and Catholic in 1960s Glasgow and facing down a suit of profound childhood dramas. It's not exactly the sort of event I'd normally be attending, but if you restrict yourself only to those that make you feel safe and warm, then you kinda miss the point. Mr. Diaz is a spellbinding interviewee, and not once is there a hint of self-pity or judgment about all the adults whose own afflictions and bad choices had stalked his childhood. Only love, pity and mercy. I will buy this book. It's easy to be cynical about the rise of the Rural Literary Festival in Scotland over the last 20 years or so. You'd imagine these to be the readout of the Ponytail and the red corduroy trousers where packs of chin-strokers strolled along, hands clasped behind their backs and brows permanently furrowed as though contemplating the place of oat milk in their own universe. My disinclination for these events is probably rooted in the trauma of having attended a few at the Edinburgh International Book Festival when I worked in the shortbread city. It seemed then that the main purpose was to be seen there. Once, at an event with Howard Jacobson, a man bun fool declaimed loftily about how important it was to build a narrative structure. Mr. Jacobson, as politely and kindly as he could, replied that he often didn't have a clue where his books were heading when he started writing them. I applauded heartily at this and was cut down by a firing squad of 100 Newtown stayers. After a day and night in Wigtown, though, my jaundice is receding rapidly. I'm introduced to Sarah P. Corbett, who will soon be appearing on stage with Natalie Bennett, the former Green Party leader. Ms. Corbett is a globally recognised environmental activist who has developed the art of the gentle protest. As we chat about dialects in our childhoods, mine has Glasgow, hers and Liverpool, Evertonian by the way, and about England and Scottish independence, it begins to dawn on me that I should probably know her. I discover later that she might just be one of the most influential people I've ever met. Not once in our conversation, though, did she offer a hint of her achievements. I resolved to get down more often, and to read more books. Speak to the people. "This is Wigtown," says Ms. Corbett. "There's no hierarchy here and no superstars. Everyone gets treated the same, and this informs the entire atmosphere." She's a craftivist. I'm vaguely aware of what this is, but I must find out more. Another of my tawdry preconceptions dismantled. I encounter Adrian Turpin, my fondly remembered former newspaper colleague. Mr. Turpin has successfully turned his life around since leaving newspapers, and is the only one of our kind I know to be given a bauble from the British Empire. He has been director of the Wigtown Book Festival for 18 years and, with a small but passionately committed team of staff and volunteers, has made this place shimmy and swing. In his welcoming speech, he talked of the challenges facing the Wigtown Book Festival. We faced attacks on sponsorship from people protesting in ways which I find quite puzzling. We currently have no certainty on financial support. We don't know yet if we will have a financial settlement next year from Creative Scotland. We don't know what money the Scottish Government will give to the arts. In my lazy, misconceived analysis of arts funding, it's too easy to cite the horror shows that Creative Scotland have chosen to fund in recent years as emblematic of a runaway cartel of cheeky virtue signallers indulging their own concealed proclivities. Then you come to Wigtown and discover that what having a book festival, which has grown slowly and organically over more than 2 decades, has brought to a region largely unloved and neglected by Civic Scotland. Kay Christie's family have been embedded in Galloway for several generations, and are after an peregrination through this town. It seems that she's either related to or otherwise connected to every second soul she meets. The townsfolk probably weren't quite sure what to make of this travelling circus of bibliophiles and literary savants, pitching up every year and ruffling its douche retitude, but they've embraced it now. Perhaps embraced is the wrong word. This is Galloway, after all. They nod their heads and smile quietly at it. I don't see what's not to like, says Miss Christie. I only see positives. In a place like this, you always have to travel to places like Glasgow or Edinburgh if you want to see big ticket arts and cultural events, yet there are just as many people here who love politics and history and literature as anywhere else. The great joy of this festival is that the circus is coming to us. We like showing this place off, and there's a lot to show off. We all love coming to the events and seeing who we can see. There are no large population centres near here, so often you don't get to see close friends and families for months at a time. You have to make a lot of effort and make a lot of time to organise social events. Her friends Liz and Robin, and Lynn and Karen, are holding court in Scotland's most remarkable pop-up tavern, just behind the county buildings. It's a large house owned by Martin Toon who, for the duration of the festival, decants all his furniture to a local farm and replaces them with pub tables. All the food and drink he sells in what is usually his main living room is sourced locally. Across the road and up the street, there's another pop-up business called Bladnoch Botanics, selling lotions and hand creams. They offer me some samples, but my skin is long past the salvation of such unguents. The thousands of visitors who will descend in Wigtown this week is a good testbed for the seeds of this new business. There are 7 permanent bookshops in Wigtown, the first of which was The Bookshop, still owned and operated by Sean Bythell after 23 years. This is the bookshop on which all others ought to be modelled. It's where G.R. Hartley would have found his book about fly fishing in the famous Yellow Pages advert. Mr. Bythell's best-selling Diary of a Bookseller is based on his experiences here. Today, he's trying to find a suitably ancient prop for the television interview that's happening downstairs with the Antiques presenter, James Braxton. He tells me that part of the success of this event is on including local people and being aware of customs, habits and challenges. We don't want this to be a prissy, highbrow literary event. It needs to be accessible to everyone, and that means being prepared to listen to and communicate properly. On every corner, the talk is of Pam Ayres, who brought the tent down on Friday night. Just knowing that Ms. Ayres is still reading her poetry in sold-out venues has made this trip worthwhile. And the article was written by Kevin McKenna and read by me, Ian McKenna. No relation. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 29th of September, from the news section. 2 to appear in Glasgow court on human trafficking charges. Report by Josh Carmichael. 2 people are due to appear in court after being arrested in connection with alleged human trafficking offences. Police Scotland said a 28-year-old man and a 50-year-old woman were arrested and charged in connection with alleged offences in Glasgow. It comes after an investigation by Greater Glasgow's dedicated human trafficking unit, with Police Scotland confirming the arrests were made on Friday. The pair will face Glasgow Sheriff Court on Monday. Detective Inspector Grant Curry said, "We are committed to working with our partners to pursue those involved in this type of criminality, with strong focus on safeguarding individuals who may be at risk of exploitation. Information from people within our communities is key to helping us identify those involved in committing these crimes against vulnerable people in our society. I would urge anyone with information or concerns about exploitation of any kind to contact Police Scotland on 101 or Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. And the article was written by Josh Carmichael and read by me, Ian McKenna.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 30th of September 2024, from the Voices section. Glasgow Regional Funding in Focus as Labour Budget Looms. Article written by Stuart Patrick, CEO of Glasgow Chambers of Commerce. It is now just 1 month to go until the Chancellor of the Exchequer puts us out of our misery, or perhaps helps us understand the full extent of our misery with her budget announcements. There will be one issue I will be keeping a close eye on from a Glasgow perspective: regional funding given to local authorities to invest in the growth of their economies. Locally, the recent opening of the Govan-Partick Bridge is one example of an initiative financed from regional resources, while the funding of 11 research commercialisation projects with our universities through the City Region's designation as an Innovation Accelerator Partnership is another. Submissions for the UK Government's Budget and Spending Review closed a fortnight ago, and British Chambers of Commerce, BCC, which represents the 52 accredited chambers of commerce in the UK, including our own Glasgow Chamber, and 75 British chambers overseas, has sent in our current priorities for Chancellor Rachel Reeves to consider. It usually works best if there are a few specific requests, and this year the BCC has chosen to emphasise 5. 3 focus on devolved issues in skills planning, business rates and transport infrastructure, which will be more directly relevant to English regions. However, the other 2 have wider UK applications. One is a request for the expansion of full expensing against corporation tax of investments in business assets to include a company's leased assets. This reflects the ongoing task of boosting the worryingly low levels of UK business investment. The second is seeking greater use of the tax system to support workplace health and well-being. The unusually high number of workers dropping out of employment after the pandemic for health reasons is the main motivation for BCC looking at ways to encourage employers to invest more in staff health. These are undoubtedly major issues, but Glasgow Chamber was especially keen for BCC to raise the importance of regional funding. Mayors in England have become increasingly significant figures, persuading central government that they are best placed to tackle many of those issues. Glasgow City Region has also been doing more work with business and with higher education institutions to create a range of projects investing in local infrastructure, skills and business innovation. Glasgow Chamber set out 5 asks during the general election that build on the regional structure: investment in the Clyde Metro Light Rail project to speed up its delivery, initiatives to help our city centre attract new investment, a fresh investment programme to build maritime industry on the Clyde, a new innovation deal to expand the number of high-growth technology firms in the region, and a regional skills and jobs programme to help tackle chronic skills shortages and help more Glaswegians into work. Each of these could be delivered effectively at the regional level. We were therefore pleased that BCC made clear its support for greater powers to be devolved to the local level, specifically calling for greater certainty on the future of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, UK SPF, money that was intended by the last government to go some way towards replacing European structural funds that previously played a fundamental role in financing regional economic development plans. Glasgow City Region has been investing over £60 million worth of UK SPF, and with no announcements yet on the role of UK SPF after March next year, several programmes risk being stopped early, including those aimed at helping citizens furthest away from successfully getting a job. The Labour Party manifesto made clear it would transfer power out of Westminster and into our communities. It also committed to multi-year funding settlements, greater local flexibility in deciding how those funds are used, and an end to the wasteful competitive bidding that was a regular feature of the last government's approach to levelling up. Consider the range of programmes that Glasgow City Region was having to manage. City Deal funding, multiple rounds of levelling up funds, the Innovation Accelerator Programme, Community Renewal Funds, Shared Prosperity Funding, bidding for Green Freeport status, and most recently, delivering investment zone status. All these programmes have different accountability requirements and varying timeframes, and now the City Region is unsure what the status of each of these streams of funding is. Will they be continued into the next financial year and beyond? We don't know. The Chancellor in her budget and spending review could make 3 main announcements that would help. Make it clear which of the existing programmes are being maintained, such as Green Freeports and investment zones, as originally announced. Commit to all other programmes being carried forward into next year at least. That will allow time for sorting out the new approach that the Labour manifesto described. Finally, set out what the steps will be for applying the manifesto principles. Regional devolution can be a powerful policy for growing our economy, and with those 3 simple steps, the Chancellor can begin delivering on those manifesto promises. That article was written by Stuart Patrick, Chief Executive of Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 30th of September 2024, from the Voices section. The Importance of International Students to Scotland. Article written by James Miller. James Miller examines the importance of international students, dispelling the harmful rhetoric associated with international students because of immigration policy battles, and talking about their contributions both financially and culturally. Scotland has a rich reputation for valuing education. That pursuit of knowledge, of being curious, of seeking to share our learning, is a universal experience and doesn't stop at territorial borders. It therefore stands to reason that universities across this vastly interconnected world would want to be as international as possible. The benefits to being international are vast. At its best, it's an enduring commitment to enhancing the experience of staff, students, and the community in encouraging a globally aware and inclusive learning environment. Internationalisation, when executed ethically, benefits us all. In recent years, the narrative around international students in the UK has regrettably been caught up in wider commentary around legal and illegal migration and kicked around as the proverbial political football. The consequences have left our current and future international student community and our universities pretty bruised. Yet, we may now have some reasons to be optimistic. The new UK government has retained the crucial graduate route visa in its current form. The Secretary of State for Education took the opportunity, very early on in her role, to signal a change in the rhetoric. Miss Phillipson wanted there to be no doubt. International students are welcome in the UK. As MP for Houghton and Sunderland South, she was clear that the thousands of international students that study at the University of Sunderland contribute so much to her home city as they develop new skills and chase new horizons. That's absolutely the perspective shared in Scotland. Earlier this year, the leaders of Scotland's cities and business interests spoke about how strongly in favour they are of international students and the graduate route, citing the vibrancy they add to our towns, cities and regions, and the high-level skills and focus they bring to the workplace. It's positive that we now have continuity of the graduate route and a marked shift in tone from the UK government. It is too soon to conjecture on the impact. At best, we hope it will be enough to reverse the fall in international student demand that we have seen from some markets over the last year, and return to a managed growth of students coming to these shores. Over the coming months, institution will gain a greater understanding of this year's international intake. This demonstrates it is possible to reset narratives to effect positive change. As I take on the convenership of Universities Scotland's International Committee, I see further opportunity to do that in Scotland's long-term interests as we seek to achieve the ambitions set out in the Scottish Government's International Education Strategy. Looking ahead, international students hold the potential to be a socio-demographic asset for Scotland's future. Scotland has a population challenge. Our population is ageing, and the proportion of under-16s and of working age is set to fall steeply from the end of this decade. Scotland's demographic forecasts are much more challenging than they are for other parts of the UK, but it is unquestionably a problem for both governments. Since 2011, Scotland's limited population growth has been entirely dependent on migration, a significant proportion of which are international students. Those who travel to Scotland for study are highly motivated, highly ambitious, often arriving with an undergraduate degree already, and keen to take advantage of the high-quality education on offer. We need to look long-term and combine policy agendas across the UK to find solutions that work for Scotland. As a net attractor of talent, Scotland's universities are part of the solution. The UK government has come to office with clear signals about giving greater power to the regions and nations and affording greater respect within UK policymaking for regional distinctiveness. There is scope within this space for a conversation about how carefully managed high school migration, calibrated to national or regional need, might help to address Scotland's demographic challenges to some extent. Societal need, rather than universities' interest, is the primary driver. Universities will always want to welcome students and staff to study and work here, as well as to encourage outward mobility for our own staff and students. The exchange of ideas and cross-border flow of people is core to our values and has contributed to our success over centuries. The extent to which Scotland has become reliant on the cross-subsidy model as a financial necessity to keep degrees taxpayer-funded for home students is problematic, and it too needs to be addressed as a separate issue over a relatively short time horizon. We need a longer-term plan, being transparent about Scotland's challenges and working constructively to turn these into opportunities, with universities playing a pivotal role. It's a long game that requires a conversation that is well timed to begin immediately, given shifting narratives elsewhere. Professor James Miller is the Principal and Vice-Chancellor, University of the West of Scotland, and the International Committee Convener, Universities Scotland. And that article was read to you by Elizabeth.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 1st of October 2024 from the business section. ScotRail peak fares return is a tax on work, Finance Chief claims. This article is by Ian McConnell. The Chief Executive of industry body Scottish Financial Enterprise has claimed the return of peak fares on ScotRail is a tax on work. The off-peak all-day fares trial ended on Friday at ScotRail, which is owned by the Scottish Government. SAV Chief Executive Sandy Begbie said yesterday, "The return of peak rail fares will be felt by commuters from across our sector, not least those travelling between Scotland's major cities to get to work." He claimed peak fares are a tax on work, with knock-on implications for what people spend in other parts of the economy. Their return will also have a negative impact on social mobility and opportunities for people to seek career advancement across Scotland. When it announced in August that peak fares would be reintroduced in late September, the Scottish Government estimated the pilot scheme boosted demand for ScotRail services by around 6.8%. It calculated that a 10% increase in demand for ScotRail services was required to ensure the cost of removing peak fares was paid for through the growth in rail travel generated. Agency Transport Scotland in August estimated the cost of the full-year subsidy that would have been provided by the Scottish Government for the removal of peak fares by the time the pilot scheme ended on September 27th at about £40 million. Mr. Begbie said yesterday, "It's essential that we focus on making public transport simpler, greener and more affordable to rebuild customer satisfaction and increase demand." Scotland is competing globally for inward investment, while also trying to position itself as a net zero leader. Accessibility and affordability of public transport are crucial to achieving these ambitions. We hope this decision can be revisited. That article was by Ian McConnell. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 1st of October 2024, from the Voices section. Funding has to increase to support free university tuition. This article is by Garrett Stell. Free tuition remains a popular policy with cross-party support. It needs to be properly funded by the politicians who are happy to take credit for the policy. The Herald's focus on Scotland's universities is hugely welcome. It comes after a decade of underinvestment in the sector, with funding for teaching per student falling by 39% in real terms over the past 10 years. That funding, broadly called the Teaching Grant, covers much more than just teaching and funds services that support students' mental health and well-being, ensures that lecturers and tutors can provide one-to-one sessions, and supports the essential study skills vital to widening access. We know from repeated polling that free tuition remains a popular policy. Politicians know this too. Less than 3 months ago, during the general election, Labour, the SNP and the Conservatives all confirmed their support for the policy in their Scottish manifestos for the 4th of July elections. But if politicians want to take credit for free tuition, then they need to properly fund the policy. Universities cannot withstand the continual salami slicing of its funding. Cuts mean staff losing jobs and students' education being harmed. In recent months, we've seen voluntary severance schemes in universities across the country, including Glasgow Caledonian University, the University of Aberdeen, Heriot-Watt University, the University of the Highlands and Islands, Queen Margaret University, and Robert Gordon University. That's decent jobs being lost in institutions in all 4 corners of the country and a hollowing out of the educational offer. Job cuts lead to a dilution of the student experience, with a reduction in the teaching and support offered to students, and a diminution of the breadth of research carried out by staff. For those staff who remain, already excessive workloads become even more unsafe. Increasing student-staff ratios also impact the ability to support students going to university from backgrounds where higher education hasn't been the norm. Widening access is a priority, both for the Scottish Government and universities, and ensuring staff have the time and capacity to support students is critical to its success. We know that these students need more one-to-one academic and pastoral support to access, progress, and complete their studies. But if university jobs are being lost and a lack of funding is leading to staff numbers being cut, then that's a recipe for failure. Ministers will point out that public funding isn't the only funding source open to the sector. Universities have been adept at recruiting students internationally, despite the previous UK government's hostile environment and policies. While the international nature of universities and the benefit international students bring educationally, socially and culturally is well rehearsed, relying on international students as a long-term funding solution is not a viable option. Over-reliance on international student fee income puts at risk the sustainability and security of funding. Universities competing against one another globally for international students simply moves the higher education sector further towards an increasingly competitive, marketized system that doesn't reflect the purpose and value of education, nor do anything for our universities long term. It's risky too, given the volatile world in which we live. UCU has been forced to take industrial action in recent years as a result of diminishing pay and working conditions for our members, including year-on-year below-inflation pay in addition to increasing workloads, the widespread use of casualized precarious contracts, and gender, race, and disability pay gaps. At root, each of these disputes has a common thread of the lack of resources and funding coming to the higher education sector. The University and College Union in Scotland will continue to fight against job cuts and for fair work, and for university teaching, student support, and research to be properly funded. However, after a decade of underinvestment, compounded again this year by cuts, we also need to see real investment in Scotland's universities and for teaching to be fully funded. There's nothing wrong with free tuition as a policy. We unequivocally support it. And we know from UCU members working in England all too well the impact on students of being forced to amass debts of around £45,000. What is problematic is for the policy of free tuition to be knowingly and deliberately underfunded. The next time there's a manifesto commitment or a politician declares their heartfelt commitment to free tuition, we'll be demanding that, as well as taking the political credit for the policy, they also commit to actually paying for it and making right a decade of underinvestment in higher education that has cost both students and staff dearly. That article was by Garrett Stell.
The Herald on the 1st of October and the Arts and Ents section. A lost Picasso painting found in a basement in Italy by Gabriel Mackay. A lost artwork found in an Italian basement by a junk dealer in the 1960s could fetch close to £5 million at auction. The painting of Picasso's sometime muse and mistress Dara Maar was found rolled up against a wall in a cellar in Capri in 1962. In the top left was a signature Picasso, but that meant nothing to its discoverer, junk dealer Luigi Lo Rosso, who took it home and hung it on the wall. Son Andrea Lo Rosso told Il Giorno, "My first memory of the painting is when my mother hung it on the wall at home, dubbing it the scribble because of the strangeness of the lady's face. I wasn't even born yet. I knew from my father's stories that he only got 2 paintings from the Capri cellar, but only one was a signed Picasso. Both were covered with dirt and lime, so my mother put them on the ground and cleaned them with detergent like they were carpets. What a risk. My parents were simple people. They didn't know anything about art. In the 1980s, they had a restaurant in Pompeii, and to brighten up the garden, Dad displayed it out there until a painter from Rome suggested he move it in case someone stole it. When I was still a kid, I saw an identical portrait in an encyclopedia called The Bust de Femme Dora Maar. Clearly the one we had was only a copy. But as I grew up, I did some research and consulted with various experts who told me to get it verified, because after all, the painter spent many holidays in Capri in the 50s. One of those was the art historian and critic Vittorio Sgarbi. Mr. La Rosso says, I spent a whole day with him, and at the end of it he pushed me to continue my research because no one could say in black and white that it was fake. He also warned me that I'd encounter no shortage of problems, and he was quite right. The painting was seized by the Carabinieri State Police on the ridiculous charge of receiving stolen goods. Above all, though, in Paris they wouldn't even give me the time of day. I went to the Picasso Museum in person with the artwork on the back of my car. They told me to stay outside and wait. Can you imagine? I went home with the painting. Perhaps one reason for their recalcitrance is the fact that a bust of Femme Mar already exists in the Picasso collection. Indeed, it sold for more than $22 million at auction in 2016. According to art researcher Luca Gentle Canal Marcanti, though they can both be originals, they're probably two portraits not exactly identical of the same subject painted by Picasso at two different times. I'm sure of one thing: the one found in Capri and now kept in a vault in Milan is authentic. His certainty comes not just from his own expertise, but that of a range of experts. The graphologist Sia Altieri compared the signature to the others by Picasso and found it to be a match. The chemical scientific analyst of artworks, Maurizio Serracini, verified its age. Miss Altieri, who's examined works by Leonardo da Vinci, Salvador Dali, and Lucio Fontana, said it's very dense oil painting, which in the signature has the same characteristics of other autographs by Picasso. More verifications came from Paolo Cornali of the CSG Palladino Chemical Lab, David Bussolari of the Diagnostica per l'Art Fabri, and Franca Vitelli of the Vitelli law firm. He will now seek to have it verified by the Picasso Foundation before putting it up for auction. Mr. La Rosso said, "I will auction it as Dad always wanted, although sadly he passed away 3 years ago. That way all the money spent on the expert reports will have been a good investment." And that was by Gabriel Mackay.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.